everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Injustice for All with Judge Joe Brown. And today we're going to be talking about China versus the US and the battle of the tariffs, or shall we say the battle of Goliath. So where are we at right now? Trump did a 90-day pause of all tariffs except for China. Yesterday, Wednesday, the stock market surged. Thursday, it did drop a little bit. There have been some very wealthy people who made billions of dollars yesterday, and now people were saying, was Trump involved in any type of insider trading? So as of right now, U.S. tariffs on China now totals 145% after the latest hike.
Hey, David, absolutely. I just got off the phone with a White House official, and they need to clarify that the new effective tariff rate against China, effective today, is actually 145%, not 125% as they told us yesterday. This is not a new shift. This is based, I want to make clear, on a close reading of the executive order. I have it here. When they amended their executive order yesterday, they changed the rate, the reciprocal rate, so-called, from 84% to 125%. But that comes on top of the fentanyl rate that was already in place this term of 20% against China. So a White House official confirmed to me it is correct to add those numbers together, making the new rate that President Trump has added in tariffs against China so far this term to 145%. A big jump there from where we thought we were even yesterday and the start of the week as well. These numbers just keep increasing. And as you guys know, you do have to add that 145% to any tariffs that were already in place before President Trump took office this term. That's the Section 301 tariffs from his first term, as well as anything else that was already in place at baseline. But now the new rate, when you add all these figures together for this term that they've added against China, is 145% on Chinese imports.
God, can people leave me alone a
very
little
important
bit?
Clarification. Thank you for that. It does make you wonder, because I think the broad assumption was 125% included, perhaps the 20% already from fentanyl. I asked this question earlier of Eamon, but I'd love to ask it of you as well. In terms of exemptions, we were talking to an analyst earlier, of course, about Apple, where it may really be so important for a company like that to get an exemption, given how many iPhones are made in China. Do we have any expectations do you have any reporting around what may or may not happen when it comes to that?
The best that we know is that the president said yesterday he was willing to consider some exemptions for some companies, but he didn't want to give any specifics on what it would require. So we don't know anything further than that. We know that Tim Cook has been in touch with this White House, in touch with this president. He's been down to Mar-a-Lago, been trying to win some of those exemptions here, as have other companies. But we just don't know yet. What I will say, despite just how high this China tariff is, now even higher than we initially thought, there is some more optimism now because companies like Apple that have production in other countries as well, they can at least move around. But I will say that, there was softer language from the president yesterday that at least he's considering exemptions. We didn't get that before. And if past his prologue in the first term, we did get some. So I would expect a lot more to come on that front.
I mean, a few things. The rate is so gargantuan compared to, first of all, the other tariff rates that we have and everything else. It makes me think that they're bringing them to the table to a deal, because at some point it's just unsustainable to have trade this way. And then their tariff rates now on our exports into China are what? Above 80%?
84, right?
They're at 84%, yep. And they're doing all these other things. The TikTok deal, for example, is on ice. The president acknowledged that yesterday. The companies that have all been added to the blacklist, the entities list. I saw a headline this morning that China's buying some soybeans from Brazil. That's a hit to U.S. farmers. So China can do a lot more. I agree with you that I think with rates this high, you would think there have to be negotiations, and potentially we'll see those in the coming days. But I've been kind of amazed over the past few days just how little conversation has been going on between the U.S. and China. It doesn't seem like there's any sort of dialogue at this point. We've seen the tit for tat escalating without the leaders, at least.
How does this affect American businesses? Is this restricting a lot of United States businesses from working with China, i.e. Apple and others? China is known for having slave labor. Now, I know Trump wants to bring back more manufacturing jobs here in the United States, and people are making fun of Americans making iPhones and things like that. So U.S. is China's biggest import, and China is the U.S. biggest export. So does China need the United States more, or do we need China more? And what is going on? So I want to get your thoughts.
Not the right questions. See, here's the thing. The United States became the major industrial power in the whole world prior to World War II, actually prior to World War I. And the way we accomplished that was to have very restrictive tariffs, so that basically if you wanted to sell it in the United States, which was an enormous market, it was the high growth sales opportunity for the rest of the world. It was a frontier that was expanding from coast to coast, a rapidly expanding population, a technological base that had been put in place, heavy industry. It had proved itself militarily with the U.S. Civil War, and it was something to be reckoned with, and everybody was trying to get in here. Well, we preserved our markets for American manufacturers, which allowed them to get big. People were willing to pay the tariffs in order to sell here in this market. And that went on through World War II. When World War II ended, Europe was in a shambles, and we came up with the Marshall Plan, which was something designed to get Europe back on its feet so it could become a sales opportunity for American industrial output. The same thing with Asia. Well, Japan got put solidly on its feet. Europe got put solidly on its feet, and the reason for stripping the tariffs, which had occurred after World War II, then ceased. What has happened in the meantime is American investors have taken their investments overseas because the labor is cheaper over there to a great extent. The educational level is higher over there to a great extent. And moving their centers of manufacture to Europe and Asia allows them to come back in and sell their products here in the United States tariff-free. Now, these are U.S. people who happen to be investors, Wall Street, in other words. Now, they get tax breaks, they get away from, taxation because they're subject to what goes on in Europe and Asia, not in the United States. They raise a lot of clamor about the danger of tariffs because they're getting hurt, but they should get hurt. They live here, they take advantage of the U.S. military to stabilize the world's economic environments and protect their investments abroad, but they're not paying taxes on it. And we can walk in our kitchens and open up a kitchen drawer or a cabinet, and damn near everything that's in there is going to be marked made in China, from the knives, which require steel, to the electronic devices, to the fabric devices, whether you're talking tablecloths, pot holders, or whatever. And that's inexcusable. That takes away the market for U.S. steel. And what happens with that is our steel industry goes down. Now, World War II started in part because the United States basically had a worldwide monopoly on the production of certain kinds of steel, and Japan didn't. Germany didn't either. So we were in an enviable position. Now, all of that's become a rust belt. You go out in your driveway and the vehicle out there is most likely to be made somewhere in Asia or Europe, not in the United States. Now, when you have tariffs and you focus the manufacturing scene on the United States, industry has no gain to be had by moving abroad, because the tariffs say, well, you're going to wind up losing money trying to sell it back to the United States. You might as well make it here. And when they say, well, yeah, the math does add up like that, so I better go back to the good old US of A and revitalize the factories that my company has over there or here. And when you do that, you put Americans back to work, you increase the tax base, you set up markets because foreign entities still want to use the opportunity to sell in our markets or export to our markets. And you have one interesting thing that nobody wants to talk about, and that is you take Americans with less education than some, and you give them an opportunity to work in factories, and they make a very high income for their education level. So that spreads the money around. Nowadays, we have sort of a lopsided situation here because thanks to some prior administrations 40 some years ago, we have higher education basically priced out of the reach of a lot of people. And we're up against China with about 1.3 billion people. That's 1 billion plus 300 plus million. We have 300 plus million and lack the billion. China educates anybody and everybody free of charge. All you have to do is put in the effort. So when you have 1 billion more people who are given freebie higher educations, you're going to produce more individuals who are very deep into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, than when you have a society like ours, where we have priced the higher education out of most people's reach. And even if you get the higher education, unlike damn near all of the rest of the world, you make very little in return for that higher education. So we're getting suckered, and we're getting a whole lot of nonsense thrown our way about how tariffs are going to hurt the American economy. In a few weeks, you'll see the difference. Already, we've got a 96% increase in the steel market here just in the last few weeks. Those things come into play, but they're not publicized heavily. And then half of what Wall Street does is just sheer nonsense. And there is a thing out there that says, you know, a cow got hit on Interstate 40 somewhere in Oklahoma. So Wall Street loses, points for that day. And the other little inside thing is just a nice way to manipulate stuff where what you do is you create a fright amongst a lot of people. You know what's going on. So when prices drop, you can buy. And then when they go up, you can sell and or trade and make an enormous profit because you've manipulated the market. You can wave a pink flag and everybody goes, oh my God, pink flag, what does it stand for? And the market will drop and then people will buy. And then as soon as they buy, the market goes back up and then they sell and they make a profit off of what they did. And since we no longer have long-term capital gains in place to the extent that the taxation was, if you kept an investment for 6 months, then you only got taxed on 1/2 of your gains. Now, there is no incentive to keep it because that got wiped out some decades ago. So you can buy it and sell it 3 seconds after you acquire it, and there's no penalty one way or the other. So the market trends toward volatility rather than stability. Because if you have stability, that encourages long-term investments in sound companies that are going to go somewhere and lend substance to the economy. That becomes unprofitable. So what you want to do is generate the ups and downs so you can create situations, if you're big enough, where the price suddenly drops, you can buy, and then it'll suddenly go up when you buy and you can sell, so you can manipulate the markets pretty well, and that's not being dealt with and hasn't for some decades. And when you get that bunch that has exported American industry, science and technology abroad, and exploited the fact that there are essentially zero tariffs relative to the United States and elsewhere, it's very profitable for some people. Meanwhile, when it comes to boosting the American economy, American goods, when sold abroad, are subject to very high tariffs. So we allow that situation to exist, and those of our citizenry who are investors make an enormous profit because American goods are kept out of the European markets. They can move their businesses over there, make stuff over there, sell without any tariffs when they sell internally to the foreign markets where they have put their factories. And then since there are no tariffs, or were no tariffs in the U.S., they could sell them for very high profit margins back to the country that is protecting their interests through its military. It's a scam. So it's time that got unraveled.
Right.
And that, I think, is what the real deal is, rather than what we get from all of the populist press that is just, we've been doing things the same old, and our friends, our investors who also own Scripps Howard and the Hearst change and all of this, and CNN and CBS and NBC and ABC and WSNBC, they all have a common block of investors that are letting it not trickle down, but pour down. Hey, you guys who are on the news, you need to say something about this because this is coming from corporate. And corporate, of course, has its investors, stockholders, boards of directors, and all such, who are all tied in with somebody that has a heavy investment in Mercedes. Remember, Daimler-Benz came over Mercedes, and they did this thing with Chrysler, and you still see some of their joint products, Crossfire, going around. Chrysler did a thing with Mitsubishi. You get the same thing with Ford doing stuff with Volkswagen and all of this other stuff. So you have these people who are international entrepreneurs, and they don't care where the hell it happens as long as it makes them the maximum amount of money. And they may have a residence in New York, a penthouse apartment, and they have a chateau in the south of France and one in Switzerland to ski in, and something down in Rio for the off season, and a good condominium in Tokyo when they have to go over there for business, and something in India. So they're international citizens, and they have 180-foot, 3,000-ton yachts that they cruise around in, and they don't give a damn about what's going on in the continental United States, other than that the tax base remaining high enough so U.S. military can be equipped with F-35s, F-22s, B-52s, B-1s, B-2s, F-16s, F-A-18 Hornets, Nimitz-class aircraft carriers and such like, and Virginia-class submarines and Ohio ballistic missile subs and such like, so they can control the proclivity for other nations to nationalize industry and such and deprive them of their profit opportunities.
In every critical market where America needs to be able to take care of itself, right, under all weather conditions, we have become very fragile. So tariffs have this dual-pronged impact. Prong number one is it starts to realign the world order. But prong number two is that it allows us to start taking back control of a lot of these markets so that we do the hard work so that we can rely on ourselves. Otherwise, if something bad were to happen, there's like a lot of really bad outcomes here where we cannot fend for ourselves. We can't make the vaccines we need, okay? We can't make the technological equipment we need. We can't make the computers we need. We can't make the chips we need. In every revenue.
Is that, are they trying to protect local businesses?
It's a great question. I think that for every country, the answer to that question is different, but it typically starts with how can we generate revenue for ourselves? I don't think they have a competitive, New York Yankees hat manufacturer in Vietnam, for the record, but it's just a policy that allows them to make money off of the United States in two ways, right? They make money by making stuff there, sending it to here where we all buy it, and the dollars go back. And then they make money in a different way, which is whenever we try to sell our products there, they can tax it on the way in.
Is that, are they trying to protect?
So let's just say, 5 or 10 million Americans absolutely crushed it over the last 25 years with globalism and trade. But that still leaves 325 million Americans that haven't. And so you have to right this ship. That's one. The second thing, though, is you saw this in COVID. America is totally unprepared to fend for herself if push came to shove. We can't make things here anymore, right? We have kids that can make TikToks, but we don't have scientists that can make drugs. So let's just say,
You know what? There's another fault. Or is this clip still playing? I can't hear it. So let me just add something here. One of the interesting fallouts that people in minority communities, the Hispanic, the Black, the Native American, ought to be concerned with, very concerned with, is it would tone down the need for penal institutions and the criminal justice system doing what it does, because it's not controlling crime, it's controlling surplus labor. And so many job opportunities have been exported overseas that there is a severe shortage of enough jobs to go around to the whole population here in the country in terms of income being generated on the level that would be expected. That contributes, by the way, to homelessness because of the unemployment situations, a lot of despair. And the criminal justice system is being used to house or deal with surplus labor that these policies that we've had over the last 7 decades of exporting industry and job opportunities abroad is generating in the United States. Labor is a commodity, just like wheat, corn, or cotton. And when you have a glut, you do through 3 things: cut back production, subsidize the producer, store the surplus. The surplus in this case goes in a jail cell instead of a grain silo. The subsidy is the welfare check. The cutting back of production is the hip hop nonsense and everything where the kids feel entitled. They don't work hard. They don't achieve. They don't know how to deal with going out and create anything except distraction. They create situations where there's despair, chaos, confusion. They commit crime. They get put in a penal institution and stored. Yes, they get made to manufacture license plates, but that's just to keep them out of mischief. So what's going on is we've got all kinds of things the tariffs could reverse because they would bring industry back to the United States. See, it's cast right now as though the tariffs are going to revoke retaliation and prevent our products from being sold abroad. Our products are not being sold abroad, except in the instances where they are the only ones that are available. F-35s, fighter planes, 500, 750, and 1,000-pound high-tech bombs, missiles, and general munitions that the rest of the world would like. And even then, the U.S. Army's M4 carbines are made by FN, which is located in Ware, Belgium.
I don't want to go too much into the
The
military.
rifles are made by Sig Sauer. The pistols are made by Sig Sauer. And what is Sig Sauer? That's essentially a German and a Swiss industrial complex. So what the devil are we even doing when we get to talking about cutting back our market, because our markets have dwindled into practically nothing, and we are a place to absorb what everybody else makes. So we also have the problem with safe streets, right? Homelessness, drug addiction, mental health issues, a health situation in terms of the medical industry right here. And we are getting shafted because we don't have any protection from foreign exploitation on an economic level.
All right, I want to play this last clip here.
Year one is difficult, okay? But it could raise upwards of $750 billion a year, okay?
You're saying tariffs.
Tariffs. What they said that they would do is they would then turn around and cut the federal
Income tax.
Yeah. For anybody making 150,000 or less to zero.
So what they're doing is using the tariffs to offset the price shock.
Year one is
Yeah, that's another thing too. Generate the money. And by the way, the amount of money they just mentioned, $750 billion.
Mm-hmm.
That's less than the U.S. government 20-some years ago paid out under the Obama administration. Well, not 20 years ago, under the Obama administration to bail out Goldman Sachs, which sponsored him in both of his elections and made sure he got exposure. And the Bush administration, $700 billion to bail out Goldman Sachs, Smith, Barney, and all of that bunch of investors that were behind this exportation of American industry and jobs abroad. So the savings would just basically make up for what we gave to those entities that, remember the phrase, too big to fail.
Right.
That's a proportion. It sounds like a hell of a lot of money, but it's not. It is essentially slightly less than the current U.S. Defense Department budget. So that would help.
like for the next 100 years, do we really think the solution for protection is like a tank? You know what I mean? Like, like a tank is like 70 years old. It's like 100. Just like it just doesn't make sense. The real protection is what you said, which is like economic cooperation.
Yeah, aligned interests.
Aligned interests,
But
and a bunch of drones in the.
That's BS. That doesn't work. For the last 2,000 years, everybody's been coming up with high-tech solutions so you don't need people. People are the subject of wars, not the machines. You might as well just say, all we're going to do if we just go to machines is play chess. Somebody sits back and moves the chess pieces, and the chess pieces are like they're on Star Wars, where they're animated and do their own thing. And that's not going to work. That's crap. That's just sophomoric and unsophisticated. And by the way, one of the reasons that any intelligent assessor of circumstances might assign to what's going on between the U.S. and China has got to do with this. China has said at the point we get to worldwide in about 2027, that's about a year and a half away, we will be ready to take back Taiwan come hell or high water. And the United States, under the Biden and Obama administrations and the Bush administration, has given away most of its high-tech inventory of artillery missiles, weaponry, tanks, and a lot of other things. And we don't really have the time to build up what we need to stand off and fight the People's Republic of China in a conventional war situation without going nuke on things. So I would say that one of the things that is not being discussed, so there will be no face to be saved or lost, is we're really going to boost you, China. And if you want us to back down, since most of your stuff is sold over here, then you're going to do something about this Taiwan commitment that you've made circa 2027, a year and a half from now. We're not going to have that. So what are you going to do, guys? Do you want your 1.3 billion people over there to be dissatisfied with their rapidly growing economy and their rapidly improving individual circumstances? Or do you want to let Taiwan go a little bit longer and we can work this out at some other time? Now, that's what's in the background, and that's one of the things you do when you negotiate. As Clausewitz said in his book On War.
Well, China said they are open. China said today they are open to talk with the United States. And I want to play this last.
And that has nothing to do with just economics. It has a lot to do with economics and potentially avoiding a shoot 'em up.
Right.
So remember the important thing, war is but the ultimate extension of the political process. And if you can resolve that without having to kill a whole bunch of folk, you should do so. That's Clausewitz. It is an important principle that a lot of these bozos who don't understand it because they weren't interested in it, never studied it, and have never been exposed to. So we have just short of a war going on here, which in this case is political, diplomatic, and economic. And if we can resolve it by leaning on China, saying, okay, we don't have to go to the shoot 'em up thing, we'll just hurt you economically. Now, that pain that will result in unrest and some more Tiananmen Square incidents, do you really want that happening, or do you want domestic tranquility in China?
All right, let me play this clip.
Take that one narrow example and apply it across every industry you can imagine, from shoes to iPhones and everything in between. And what has essentially happened over the last 25 years is we have hollowed out an enormous part of the middle class economy in the United States. And we've explained it away by saying, hey, we don't want to do that kind of work. Instead, we're going to, like all of us, like we'll do a podcast, or, somebody will be a consultant. Like you'll just go up the stack, right? They'll say up the stack. And so over the last 25 years, that's been happening. And all of these other countries have benefited from America's largesse. And the reason you can say that is we are the big buyer of record for everything, right? We have the largest economy. The way our economy works is we are all buying shit, all kinds of shit, all manner of it, from that water bottle to that shirt to that hat. 80% of our economy is just consumers buying stuff. And the rest of the world makes an enormous amount of money by feeding.
Okay, now let me give an example of not so much what he's talking about, but something that people ought to know. Air Jordans. How many folk that we know run down to buy $280 Air Jordans for all of their kids in all of the available colors because it's the in thing to do? All right? Where are the Air Jordans made? Well, if you pick one up in a shoe store, you will see in the label it's made in Vietnam. To be precise, a lot of the more upscale ones have in there Hanoi, Vietnam. And that's insulting to the American people because a whole lot of us died over there supposedly to protect the Vietnamese from being taken over by communist influence. But now that same communist influence is getting us to pay $280 a pop for Air Jordans. Now, Nike is a company that is chartered where? Licensed to do business in America, but where does it originate? Now, it's taking advantage of the situation worldwide, and it is making Air Jordans in Vietnam. What does that mean? $280 for an athletic shoe for anybody outside of a pro or collegiate athlete is absolutely ridiculous, but it's being paid. But they are paying more in royalties, last I checked, to Michael Jordan for using his name than they're paying to the Vietnamese workforce that is making these hyper expensive athletic shoes. That's what I'm talking about. In other words, you have a very cheap labor cost that in this case for their entire operation in Vietnam is less than the royalties they're paying to Michael Jordan. And then they come over here and they don't sell those things for $60. They're not buddies. They don't sell them for $110, $130. They sell them for $200+. And it's ridiculous. And they make an enormous profit off of this. And that's what we're talking about that would be killed off by tariffs. You can't bring these in without hiking the price up more to the point where when you consider your low labor cost abroad and you consider the tariffs, there is no incentive to make the thing abroad. You might as well save shipping costs and a lot of other headaches that go along with international relations by making them right here in the United States and putting people to work.
All right, so let me read this. So Microsoft cancels $1 billion data center planned in Ohio, suggests they use land for farms. Licking County, Ohio, close to Columbus, was the site Microsoft chose to build $1 billion networks of data centers. Those plans will not move forward, the company now reports. The two unmentioned elephants in the room, or perhaps in a charming covered bridge, would be tariffs, obviously, but also cooling interest in AI. Quote, after carefully consideration, we will not be moving forward at this time with our plans to build data centers at the Lickings counter sites, the company announced in a message to local news media. We will continue to evaluate these sites in line with our investment strategy. We sincerely appreciate the leadership and partnership of Ohio government officials and the support of Licking County residents. We are taking the appropriate steps to ensure that the land at two of our sites can be used for farming and are following through with our development agreements to fund roadway and utility upgrades. We will continue to invest in and collaborate with local organizations to support digital skills development, restoration efforts, and to strengthen the communities in Licking County for future generations.
That sounds like an after-the-fact justification for somebody not being sufficiently bribed to allow it to happen. We don't need any more land devoted to agricultural industry. We have too much as it is under current circumstances. The agricultural industry is something that we absolutely must maintain, but it cannot sustain itself at the moment because of the imbalance in trade that tariffs are supposed to correct. We have to subsidize our farming industry. It doesn't work with the individual farmer. It only works on the collective scale, and meaning corporate farming. But the corporate farmers and the large individuals who are into it have to be subsidized to stay functional. So why is it that we have to pay them to not grow food, which is what the subsidy is about? In other words, they can't sell all of what they can grow. We have to subsidize them for not growing it because they're outcompeted by the low prices that attached to foreign grown products that are imported into the United States. There is no reason for this mass industrial opportunity, agricultural industrial opportunity, to go to waste because we are too stupid to put tariffs on foreign agricultural products. If we did, that would boost the American industry, that would boost the American farmer, that would provide a much more expedient source of food for the American public that is more dependable. We are more and more becoming dependent upon foreign entities for what we need to sustain ourselves. So what we do is we lose the ability to stay on top of the game and become more and more dependent. It's like a junkie saying, you know, I know how I started. It was okay to get high, and then I need a little bit more, and then a little bit, a little bit more. And what has happened is, unfortunately, we have become too dependent on something that is harmful to us. And that's an example. We have to subsidize our farmers for them to stay viable. And we have to subsidize them to not grow food. So the idea that you need more land upon which the farmer can grow food when we're already paying him tax dollars to not grow stuff is ridiculous. That's one reason we need tariffs, so that the American farmer can once again have a market for his goods, for all of his goods, and have a surplus that can be sold abroad like we used to do. Now,
speaking of agriculture, did you see this?
People about what immigrants do for this country, or the fact that we are a country of immigrants.
Right.
The fact is, ain't none of y'all trying to go and farm right now. Okay, so I'm lying. Raise your hands. You're not. We done picking cotton. We are. You can't pay us enough to find a plantation.
So speaking of agriculture, when we think of Black farmers who are disproportionate, you know, and a lot of farmers are struggling, she thinks that Americans don't want to farm. Americans do want to farm. They just need support.
She's stupid, ignorant, and foolish. And I say this from the perspective from having represented Black farmers. One of my more famous clients, who was a farmer, is Tom Burrell, who's written some interesting things about the experience. Now, she, by the way, has a connection with Memphis. She went to a small private religious-based school here called Rhodes College. It's got a student body of about 2,000 people in a very nice area of the city. Apparently, she absorbed some of the stupidity that is apparent in the Memphis area, which is exhibited by most of our local politicians. And she graduated, or she was there, 2006.
Well, one second, because the reason why I played that clip is around the agricultural conversation that we were having with Microsoft not building the data center. So here's the thing. Microsoft planned to invest $1 billion in construction of data center campuses. And also they bought land in Pataskala. The land purchases in 4 communities totaling $153 million for almost 1,000 acres. Microsoft still owns the land and said it remains committed to funding infrastructure improvements around its proposed data center location. So it's like this. They own the land where they was going to put the data centers, but instead of putting the data centers, they said that just use it for farming. But here we have Jasmine Crockett, a congresswoman, saying, well, we need the illegals because they are, quote unquote, willing to pick the cotton, to where Americans, especially Black Americans, are not. But when we look at what our farmers Black, white farmers in this country, they are kind of suffering when it comes to farming, agriculture, or getting loans or grants and stuff like that. So
What's going on?
yeah,
Perhaps Microsoft is not doing so well. So, based on the purchase value of the land to be devoted to agricultural production, what happens is they get a very lucrative subsidy from the U.S. government for not growing anything on it. Remember what I just got through saying about we have to subsidize our agricultural industry to keep it alive? And part of the subsidy is we've got a glut in what we can sell locally. So what you wind up doing is you get paid not to grow something.
right. And then with the tariffs, China, we do get a lot of imports of food from China. So
Yeah, dog food, cat food.
corn.
Yeah, a whole lot of things. And we've got all of this breadbasket territory, and we don't grow our food there. We bring it in. That's like oil. Do you know with 99.9% of domestically consumed oil is imported? What the devil is wrong with that?
Right.
We
So
become dependent.
so I get Microsoft saying, well, let's turn it into farmland. But then again,
They
it's
get
like
a subsidy.
but then people need jobs as well. So it's
And Microsoft is not doing well in the high-tech market these days.
now it was a quote by Donald Trump this week saying President Trump made a point of claiming working class people don't want to work in tech. Quote, Hillary was going to put them in high tech industry where you make little cell phones and things. I don't know. Do you think you'll be good at that? End quote. And then that particular county in Ohio, Licking County, 64.5% voted for Trump, 34.6% voted for Hillary. So it's red. It's a Republican area. So again, farm or data center, you need jobs and we need farming. Just split the baby.
Well, here's the thing. If you do a survey of those who have some information, expertise, or experience in it, one of the industries that's likely to be wiped out in terms of human involvement by AI is the agricultural industry in the next 30 years. So it is interesting. Maybe Microsoft, having done what they do, maybe they're trying to get into AI when it comes to a nice, safe place to use it, which is planting stuff, plowing stuff, harvesting stuff.
Right.
AI in the agricultural field, you displace a lot of human labor.
Yeah. Well, the leaders of that community, they still believe that, they will come around and build the center. So, all right.
Oh, yeah. Makes nice PR and it gives a bargain point. Remember this thing about playing chess rather than checkers, this thing about playing poker rather than shooting dice? It requires a little thought, a little bluffing, a little calculation, and a little give and take.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Injustice for All with Judge Joe Brown. Please share this video, like this video, and comment below in the comment section and share your thoughts on today's conversation. And we will see you in the next video. Bye.